Hi, this is Anthony Parent of IRS Medic, and thanks for joining us today. In this video, we're going to talk about how to renounce your U.S. citizenship, and we're going to give you a brief overview of what you're looking like. The process is a little bit lengthy, but we kind of want to give you an outline of what you're looking at. Now, renouncing your U.S. citizenship, there's a lot of complicated things to it, so you want to think about the big picture. You don't want to get lost in the weeds too much. Now, joining me is John Richardson, one of the foremost experts on helping people lose their U.S. citizenship and become other residents and dealing with the tax consequences. So, John, tell me about the big picture. What's exactly happening when someone wants to give up their U.S. citizenship?
Well, I think it's important that people don't get mired in the details, at least initially. And what's going on here is that it is a transition from being a U.S. citizen to being a non-resident alien. Now, that transition has consequences, obviously, from an immigration perspective, a nationality perspective, a tax perspective, and because of the importance of global mobility and tax in people's lives, it has implications from a life perspective as well. And every sort of technical aspect of this, every narrow detail should be understood in relation to the big picture, which is, again, the transition from citizen to non-resident alien.
So I think there's a first technical term you just sort of have to get used to if you're going to do this. The non-resident alien is what the IRS calls people who aren't tax citizens. A tax citizen is basically any U.S. person, and it doesn't matter where you are in the world. So when you get around to the questions people have about, well, what happens after I become a non-resident alien? Well, the answer is you can do anything another non-resident alien can do. Travel, go to the U.S., apply for a visa, green card. And John, do you think you could even apply for U.S. citizenship as a non-resident alien?
Well, of course, as a non-resident alien, you're basically treated from an immigration perspective, from a tax perspective, as a citizen of whatever country you happen to be a citizen of. So if you wanted to become a citizen again, you would begin the process the same way anybody else does. You'd want to get a green card, which means you get a visa to live permanently in the United States in a general sense, and then move forward from there. So of course it's possible. I think there are very few people who would do that after going to the trouble of renouncing U.S. citizenship,
Right.
but it is possible.
Now, I want to talk about the tax purposes. Oftentimes, and I think there's absolutely a public misconception that, oh, if you're looking to skip out on IRS taxes and taxes, just renounce your citizenship, and man, it is so easy. You won't have to pay taxes. Now, is that your experience? Is that why people renounce the people that you encounter? To lower their taxes?
No, I actually think that's a fantasy. I don't think it's the case at all for a very simple reason. That the majority of people, at least in my experience, who I have personally worked with, sure, they renounce U.S. citizenship, but they do not pay very much in U.S. tax. They're Americans abroad who, have to deal with the whole apparatus. But the point is they usually don't pay a lot of tax, yet they absolutely are renouncing. So this notion that, people are renouncing to avoid U.S. taxation is a fantasy. It's ridiculous. It's ignorant, and it's propagated by people who really don't understand how the Internal Revenue Code and U.S. regulations work in relation to Americans abroad.
So that basically includes mostly everybody in the world, and that includes most people in Congress. They don't understand exactly how it works. Now, there's something called the exit tax. Well, you know what? John, I do want to mention this is that, for a lot of, and I'll just give an example of a client of mine who did renounce. We did his final tax year, his 2019 tax return. We filed it for him after a very, very large tax bill from us because he had many 5471s. He got his refund of $1,200. Oh, no, I'm sorry. It was $2,000. And now he's going to get another refund, I believe, for the COVID thing. And so this was actually a situation where it was actually a burden on the IRS to process this return. It was basically a situation where you being a U.S. person was a burden on everybody. And that's actually the reality. It's not the taxes that get you. It's often the compliance burden, penalty exposure, and the cost of doing business as a U.S. person. If you're overseas, you can be considered toxic. The other question people have is on the exit tax. John, now where do people have to start worrying about that?
right at the beginning.
Okay.
I think when working with people, at least what I do, and frankly, what I think any advisor should be doing, is starting with the final document that those who are attempting U.S. tax compliance would file, and that's Form 8854, which is the expatriation statement, which is what you use to tell the IRS whether you're a covered expatriate, in which case you're subject to the exit tax rules, whether you owe any tax or not, or you're not subject to the exit tax rules. There are three triggers to be a covered expatriate. One of them is your net worth. The amount is $2 million US, assets less liabilities. But in my experience, people often don't understand what assets are included. It does include pensions and that sort of stuff. That's not an easy thing to trigger, particularly if you own a house in a major city, say London or Paris or Toronto or Vancouver. The second thing would be the tax liability test, which at present is about $170,000. That's not income but tax, meaning that if your average U.S. tax bill over the 5 years preceding were 170, roughly, it's indexed to inflation, then you'd be a covered expatriate. But that affects few Americans abroad because, remember, this is the amount paid to the IRS, and often the taxes in other countries are high enough so that they're credited against U.S. taxes owing. The third, and this is, I think, the most anxiety-provoking, is the whole tax compliance test. Can you certify compliance with the Internal Revenue Code for the 5 years prior? Whatever that means, right? I mean, it includes, I think it, includes forms and that sort of stuff. It includes all sections of the Internal Revenue Code, so it would include gift tax, etc. It's unclear exactly what that means, given, I'm sure, Anthony, you would agree that 100% compliance with U.S. taxation is completely impossible. So
Correct.
The question is, what is defensible, I think? And in my view, I think if you're reporting all your income and reporting all your accounts, you're probably most of the way there. But you need advice.
That's right. And I think that's one of the most important things that we see, that people are doing research on this, and that's fantastic. There is no one size fits all. And I think that in order to prove this, we can do that. I think we can prove that. We have a couple other videos. We did a podcast where we went over some real life hypotheticals that were sent to us by expatriates by our good friend Keith Redmond. It collected some emails and some questions for us, and he helped moderate John and I, and we answered this on his podcast, and you'll see a link to that. John's hosting that. And then we also have another video in length going over these issues a little bit more in length, and you'll see some of the comments there. People are sort of complaining it's going on a little bit too long because, yeah, we are getting into a lot of the questions that, as you'll see, will just sort of understand how important it is to get some professional advice unique for your decision. This is Anthony Parent for IRS Medic, and I want to thank John Richardson so much for joining me. He helps us out all the time. He's got a great website, citizensolutions.ca. He's the real deal. He's a fantastic attorney who really concerns about people's civil liberties. I wish we had more like him. This is Anthony Parent for IRS Medic. Thanks for watching.